The NHL world is on fire, and we're not even talking about the Stanley Cup Final just yet. We're taking a look at 5 burning questions heading into NHL free agency on the Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to your daily source for fantasy hockey news and degenerate gambling breakdowns. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, another on the road solo special. But I'm glad you're tapped in. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We wouldn't be here without y'all, and I'm glad you're here with me once again for a solo episode. Tomorrow, I'm going to get to all of the Stanley Cup X Factors and Conn Smythe best bets that you're going to need to know for the Stanley Cup on Saturday. But today, I got to look at some burning questions because the NHL newsreel, it's on all cylinders firing. Jake Guentzel, Martin Necas. Are the Carolina Hurricanes cooked with all of these potential changes coming? This is a really good team that's been knocking on the doorstep. I want to talk about Guentzel and Necas off the top of the show. There's a couple of questions already burning in Carolina. And obviously, Bertuzzi, Domi in the news for the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Gibson being shot by the Ducks. Is it Lukas Dostal's time as the number one? And speaking of which, do the Devils finally get a number one goaltender? There's news out there from Tom Fitzgerald. We'll talk about that, of course. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My friends, much love for joining me again. Hope your week has been going well. Thursday episode. This is a time as a fantasy hockey GM. I was thinking about this coming on air today. That, it might feel like you should kind of step away and take your finger off the pulse. The two teams in the final might not even tickle your fancy, even though I really do think the Cup Final is going to be juicy. And you might not be paying attention as much, but when you take a look at all the news coming out, about Guentzel, Necas, all the things that we're going to talk about on today's show, they all have fantasy implications. And if you know what's going on, for example, Jake Guentzel sounds like he is going to test the open waters. You need to know where he's headed. We had a much better idea we thought he was going to re-sign in Carolina. That's still obviously an option, but it sounds like he's very much going to test the open waters. You need to know about these things. They are all going to impact your team. I'm talking about Lukas Dostal potentially taking over as the number one. I know it's the Anaheim Ducks, but you got to know these things. GMs that win year in and year out in fantasy, they're all over it. So let's start with the Carolina Hurricanes. I just needed to come on here and say that because there is no time to be slacking in the macking. I've been a victim of it myself. You take your finger off the pulse, foot off the gas, whatever you want to call it, and people are passing you by. So let's take a look at this Jake Guentzel, Martin Necas situation. Martin Necas is an RFA. So many teams rumored to be interested. Columbus, Montreal apparently very interested in acquiring Necas' services, who is going to be looking for a payday in and around, it's sounding $7.5 to $8 million is being projected. I believe, shout out my boy Josh Wegman at The Score, writing about Necas the other day. I think he's projected to get somewhere in around $8 million. 53 points this past season, 71 the season before. An intriguing young player. Look, he's only 25 years old. A huge offensive upside. Could he be a bit more responsible with the puck? Yeah, he could. Almost a 2-to-1 giveaway takeaway ratio. He gives the puck up far too much. However, fantasy-wise, you're drafting him for those points. Shots on net this year, 231, 240 last year. Obvious value in Necas. And you got to have your eyes peeled. What's another one of these teams interested in Necas? You got it down over here. Columbus. The Florida Panthers also be knocking on the Necas door. And the Vancouver Canucks. If I had to peg two, obviously, the Philadelphia Flyers have been interested in as well, by the way. Those are the 5 that I've been reading into. I could see Montreal. Obviously, it sounds like they've been after him the most aggressively. I could also see the Columbus Blue Jackets. Shout out to Troy, obviously. We got the Blue Jackets plug in there, one of our regular listeners. We see you. We appreciate you. The support for the show means the world to both Steele and I. Make sure you drop us that 5-star review. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We appreciate the feedback. And we got a new Instagram account. Make sure you go check that out. Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. Anyway, the Carolina Hurricanes are in a precarious situation here because, yeah, they've been close. Yeah, they are a good team. Yeah, we like the Seth Jarvises of the world. Obviously, they bring in Evgeny Kuznetsov at the deadline along with Guentzel, and there was a lot of energy flowing for this team. They've fallen short the last couple of years. Toivu Teravainen is a free agent, UFA, RFA for Seth Jarvis on the back end. This team's strength, quite clearly over the last couple of years, has been their beastly blue line. They allowed the least shots on net last year at under 28. I believe they finished the year averaging 27 shots against. That's insane for this time of an NHL run-and-gun type of offense that you see every single night. Brett Pesce is a UFA. Brady Shea is a UFA. Tony DeAngelo is a UFA. This team could look very different come the start of next season. And yeah, we like Kochetkov. We like Seth Jarvis. We assume they're going to get a deal done with Jarvis. There are a lot of question marks here. So the number one question is, if Guentzel hits the open market, where does he go? And number two, it sounds like Necas is probably out the door. That's just me reading into all the news and the rumors. So those are potentially two of your biggest offensive guns out the door. Let's say that does happen. This is a team that only a couple of seasons ago is sitting outside of the top half of NHL scoring perennially. That's been their only weakness, the Carolina Hurricanes, is on the offensive end. So the second burning question goes, are the Carolina Hurricanes cooked? If they start to lose some of these key pieces, I don't think there's nearly enough offensive depth, and I love Sebastian Aho. When Svechnikov's healthy and in the lineup, he's a difference maker. Obviously, I've been on this podcast probably till I'm blue in the face talking about how much I like Seth Jarvis. However, that's not enough to get out of the Metro Division year in and year out, and they've already proven that they are just short of being that team. And if both of these guys end up walking away, or not walking away, RFA for Martin Necas, I don't see it for this Carolina Hurricanes team next year. Could obviously a lot change. Could they re-sign a number of these guys? They probably will. You got to keep your eyes peeled on this. It's going to have fantasy implications. Jake Guentzel had a sensational season last year. 30 goals, 47 assists, and only 67 games. Obviously, he was a bit banged up. I don't know if you read into this one, ladies and gents. Mans were a bit cheesed that he got let go from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not let go, but he wanted to stay there. He wasn't happy with how the contract talks went down. He wasn't happy with how the trade went down. And so I think it's needless to say he won't be going back to Pittsburgh anytime soon. But he will be hitting the open waters. These are the burning questions that I'm going to continue to talk about. Right after the break, I got to talk about some goaltenders. You and I, Steele and I should say, he's not here to back me up. We haven't talked too much about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And no, I'm not going to get into Mitch Marner because we have covered that far too much. But we're going to talk a little bit about these Toronto Maple Leafs. However, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. You want to be taking the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Killer last-minute deals, all in prices. You know that Game Time is your source. Steele and I have been using Game Time all the time for all of our favorite tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of any game that you want and know exactly what you're getting. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and you know it's guaranteed. My friends, thank you so much for joining me for Thursday's solo episode. I hope you've been feeling it once again. You know I miss Steele on these ones and twos, but I'm not missing out on any of this NHL news whatsoever because right now, this is when you do your research. You come into draft season feeling prepared. I know when I don't take in at least a little bit of news every day or every other day, I still am looking at my Keeper Dynasty lineup every couple of days. These are things that keep you prepared and feeling like you know what's going on in the NHL, and that means fantasy success. So, look, Lane Lambert gets hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's not really fantasy takes there. He's an assistant coach, had mixed results with the New York Islanders. Craig Berube's doing his thing. You move on. That's not exactly the news I'm telling you to pay attention to. However, that's still Toronto Maple Leafs related, so you know your boy's on top of it. However, Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi both signed one-year deals last year for around the same. I think Max Domi was 3.5 for Bert. Both have about 40-point seasons. Both had periods of time where they underachieved big time, especially Tyler Bertuzzi. He was like an absolute ghost for most of the first half and even some of the second half. Max Domi obviously had his ups and downs, but he looked really good at times. And what I'm hearing out there, and here's the burning question is, which one do you keep? And I really don't think you can keep both because both are obviously, after taking one-year deals last year, they're going to be looking for multi-term deals. They're probably going to try and get a bump in pay, although I don't see it for Tyler Bertuzzi. Max Domi had a pretty good playoff. He was okay in a couple of games, then ghost, kind of like his whole season. So you have to be looking at these because the Toronto Maple Leafs, if Mitch Marner moves, I'm not even going to go there. Even if he does, this Toronto Maple Leafs team is still going to score goals. William Nylander and Austin Matthews are two of the best offensively gifted forwards in the NHL today who are elite fantasy value pieces. But peripherally, around them, guys like Bert, guys like Domi, they still are going to hold value, especially in deeper formats. And you need to know what's going on, especially I alluded to the keeper dynasty side of things. I always got to give that plug. Shout out to Hoot Nanny. Shout out to all the boys in the Hoot 16-team dynasty league that I've been in. I think now we're a decade, maybe a little over a decade. Anyway, keeper season is going to be coming around the corner very quickly. And, you're going to get busy with the family. The summer hits. Stay focused, people. That's the theme of the episode. Anyway, Bert, Domi. If I were to pick, obviously it's Toronto bias. I'm going to take Domi. I'm going to take Domi on a cheaper deal than I think what Bert is going to try and get. I understand that Bertuzzi's upside might be a little bit higher considering where he was in previous seasons. Max Domi got it done for the Dallas Stars 2 seasons ago in the playoffs. He had a couple of really good seasons there strung together. I can tell that he really cares about playing in Toronto for obvious reasons. I would lean to Max Domi coming off of a season with only 9 goals. I know that's hard to say. With him shooting the puck a little bit more, maybe next year with his second year in Toronto, now all of that hoopla out of the way with coming home, I'm going to lean to Max Domi, but the main thing remains with Toronto. There is going to be a multiple of changes coming here. So speaking of situations to keep your eyes peeled on, the Toronto Maple Leafs, most definitely one of those teams. Moving on, though, for some more fantasy impact, some more fantasy angles. So those are the burning questions so far. Where do Guentzel and Necas go? Are the Hurricanes cooked? And who do you keep, Bert or Domi? I got more burning questions coming up for the rest of the episode. Tomorrow, I'm talking about everything Stanley Cup. Next week, Steele will be back. Shout out to the Italian Peninsula. Let's move on here, though, my friends, because I hope you've been feeling this. And both of these kind of go hand in hand. So, again, these next couple of episodes, they've been short and sweet, trying to get you guys in and out in under 30 minutes with all the news and some fantasy angles that you need to know. Speaking of which, Joe Pavelski is going to be looking like he's retiring. That's another little bit of news. I had to get off the notepad here. John Gibson, Trevor Zegras, both of those names, they're in the hat. The Ducks are shopping them. John Gibson, we've heard this, 13, 27, and 2 last season with a 3.54 goals against and an 888 save percentage. Obviously, those aren't good numbers. The Anaheim Ducks in front of him were not good. He allowed the most goals against just a season ago at 200 goals against in only 53 starts. Obviously, the last few seasons haven't gone John Gibson's way. But this guy obviously proved, look, he was a top 10 Vezina getter 2 or 3 times in his career, Vezina vote getter. He is a veteran goalie at 30 years old that is going to bring a steadying presence to a team that needs it. And I'm going to talk about the New Jersey Devils in a second, and I definitely think he's on their radar. I just think going to the right team will be a great refresher for a goaltender that, over the course of his career, 290 goals against, a 910 save percentage, considering how bad the Ducks have been over the last couple of years, his numbers are actually much better than what this team has run out in front of him over the past 2 seasons. Just looking back, even I know 2018, 2019, those are, that's a long time ago, 2.22 goals against, 6 shutouts, 924 save percentage in 2017, another good year in 2018. He can bring it. He needs to be in the right situation, and obviously the last 2 years haven't been it. But this is also going to open up, before I close my point on John Gibson, that's going to open up a big opportunity for Lukas Dostal. And that's another goaltender that I've come on here a lot and talked about. Again, numbers, 902 last year, save percentage, not good, 14, 23, and 3. This is the Ducks. This is a 23-year-old goaltender who's also gotten some international experience for the Czech Republic, Czechia, whatever they're calling it now. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. I think it's Czechia. Anyway, Lukas Dostal, this is a huge fantasy opportunity for this kid. And yeah, the Ducks are still probably going to be pretty doo-doo. But you can't help but feel, Mason McTavish another year. Let's see what they do at the draft. We really like Mintyukov. There are some interesting pieces on the come up for the Ducks. Olin Zellweger is also another really interesting name. The Ducks are going to get there. They're going to be a much better team in a very short amount of time, in my opinion. And Lukas Dostal is going to get to benefit from that. Look, John Gibson, it's time for him to move on. This team, obviously, Lucas, I don't actually have his contract situation up, John Gibson, so don't quote me on that. However, John Gibson's name is out there. So is Trevor Zegras's. I think they might try and turn the page a little bit and really give it to Dostal, let him run with this opportunity. That's what it's smelling like. That's what it's looking like. And you know me with goaltenders. Do not miss out on an opportunity, especially if you have keepers. That could be a really sneaky good ad next for this upcoming year. Maybe a back end of the draft selection as a little bit of goalie insurance. Obviously, I'm not trying to make Lukas Dostal one of my starting two goalies. If I can avoid it, he is going to allow a lot of goals, and we still actually don't know what happens with John Gibson. But for now, again, monitor it. It's shaping up that this is going to be a new number one goaltender. Thank me later. I got to give some love to our friends, though, holding us down on today's episode, listening every single day. We appreciate it more than you know. Every single day, listening, dropping comments, fantasy fire bets. We'll be here all next week, 5 days a week, all the way up until the cup is lifted. Throughout the summer, we'll be busting down to 3 or 4 episodes. But we don't stop, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be bringing you the fantasy fire, betting angles, upcoming draft preparation, and any news coming out of the NHL that you need. And that was the last little bit of news about the Ducks. By the way, make sure you smash that subscribe button. 5-star review. You know the drill. Means the world to me. For real, for real. This number one goaltender in Lukas Dostal, quote unquote, that I'm kind of pumping his tires here. I'm really pushing this. The question is he a number one? That's a burning question for me, especially with John Gibson's name out there in rumors. So let's close the book on that, and let's move into a team that clearly needs a number one goaltender in the New Jersey Devils. Their GM, Tom Fitzgerald, in the media Wednesday, talking about he is very willing and open to moving the 10th overall draft pick. I don't know if that alone is going to be enough. Actually, it won't be enough to get a goaltender that he is rumored to be going after in Linus Ullmark or Jacob Markstrom, the obvious one that they were rumored to be going after with some gusto. It sounded like they're ahead of the deadline. Look, the New Jersey Devils, we know what they can do, right? Over the last 2 seasons, they've scored the 8th most goals in the NHL. Only the Oilers, Avs, Leafs, Stars, Lightning, and Bruins have scored more. Oh, and Panthers. Listen to all those studly offensive teams have scored more goals than the Devils. The Devils can bring it on the offensive end. And you look at the makeup of this core, if Jack Hughes stays healthy, he's such a game changer. Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Andre Palat, and Eric Haula up front, all locked down for at least the next 2 seasons, if not multiple more. Very intriguing young players, Dawson Mercer, Alexander Holtz, and obviously on the back end in Simon Nemec. Then you bring back Dougie Hamilton this season. They've got a wonderful backup option in the veteran and Jake Allen, perfect steadying backup. If they get a number one goaltender, this New Jersey Devils team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Shout out our boy Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils. I'm sure he would back me up on this one because the last couple of seasons, the Devils have gone from obscurity into the limelight in terms of being a really good young team. And when you got Hughes and Hischier up the middle, when they're healthy, and obviously both of them have had their struggles with that, especially Jack Hughes, who, still likes to come on here and talk about JT Miller over Jack Hughes, might be a good conversation to have, but I think it's clear the upside in offensive potency is much higher with Jack Hughes. Anyway, we're not going down that rabbit hole. Shout out to Steele, shout out to JT Miller, and to our boy Blake Creamer. However, this New Jersey Devils team is going to be active in going after a goalie. Will they land a goalie? Might be the biggest burning question heading into this draft and free agency season. Tom Fitzgerald has struggled at not many things, But landing a number one goalie, he hasn't been able to get it done. All the pieces seem to be in place here for them to be able to do that. And I think I was looking at their draft board. They have 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks over the next 3 seasons. So they have some draft capital. They obviously have the 10th overall pick this season. Maybe they get creative. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But they are going to be active. They are going to be hungry in landing that because it's going to be the difference maker for this team. I just talked about the Carolina Hurricanes maybe sliding next year. The Devils go out there and get a goalie. Have a look at this entire team for a boost in fantasy value next season because that confidence of having that guy back there, a second year of Simon Nemec, a healthy Dougie Hamilton back in the lineup, all of these things are going to translate into that forward group being able to do its thing. And so that's why I'd be double circling all of those names. And obviously, whoever comes to the Devils, if it is Linus Ullmark, if it is Jacob Markstrom, obviously Linus Ullmark was coming off a very good team, but you can't help but feel Markstrom goes to an even better team in the Devils. His value goes up as well. My blood pressure is going up. I hope you guys have been feeling today's episode. Another solo episode on the way tomorrow. We've been dropping these a little bit later in the day. Shout out to Sean on the 1s and 2s. Shout out to everybody for holding me down. Make sure you're checking out the Locked On 24/7 streaming network. They got you covered every single minute of every single day. You're tired of listening to Fox. You're tired of listening to all that. You got to be checking out the Locked On streaming channel 24/7 anywhere you find your content, especially over on YouTube. Shout out to everybody for listening for the Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It's your boy Flip Livingstone signing off.